Hello again, everybody. It is time for another episode of the Silver Bullets podcast. I'm Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
Chip, it is the off season. We have spring football coming up. We have dates for that. We have not somebody that we're taking to the spring practice like on a date, but we have actual dates, calendar dates for the spring. And right now we're kind of in that off season magical holding pattern where there's not tons of news coming in. Last show we did break down the offensive line a little bit, and we may do some more positional stuff as we travel through the offseason, especially as maybe some news breaks out of spring camp. But today, why don't you and I talk? We can't talk about the basketball team because right now they're just making me really angry. So, and you're not a big basketball guy anyway. So we'll talk about the football team as we usually do. And I think maybe we just go through a little bit of the roster and by position group and talk about some of the guys who might flash in 2021. Somebody who's maybe not on everyone's radar and maybe not presumed starters in any of these positions, but maybe they are going to have some very nice seasons. What do you think?
Sounds good. I'm excited to do it.
All right, so maybe we just start at the head of the table with the position that is being vacated by Justin Fields. We've got a couple of second-year players. We've got very, very highly rated freshmen coming in, Kyle McCord. I think we start with quarterback, and I think your sleeper is whoever makes the starting lineup.
Yeah, that'd be very fair. I'm gonna go with the guy that I think don't sleep on, so to speak, is Jack Miller. And here's my rationale behind that: is the presumed starter, at least at the beginning of spring drills, is C.J. Stroud.
Right.
I'm just simply basing that completely on the fact that he came in as the backup against Clemson when Justin Fields had to leave, and without betraying all the inside information that you and I and the other fortunate souls that are insiders on Buckeye Scoop, Kyle McCord is certainly turning heads. So I'm going to go with Jack Miller simply based on the fact that I think Jack Miller, before C.J. Stroud became the hot name of recruiting well over a year ago, people were truly excited about Jack Miller, and obviously Kyle McCord is that person now. And I'm not taking anything away from C.J. Stroud or Kyle McCord, but I think Jack Miller has been overlooked in the sense that he was considered a top quarterback himself. And I really don't think he's the kind of guy that is just going to go in, quietly into the night without putting up a battle for that starting position. So that's why I'm just, again, nothing that you and I have seen, obviously, but it's more based on just kind of that gut instinct.
Yeah, I mean, if you go into the off season thinking C.J. Stroud is the favorite to win the starting job, and you would, based on last year, you would probably have that thought. Then that makes some sense. Jack Miller, he and Stroud each played in 2 games, and neither did a whole lot. Not throwing the football, kind of just managing the offense. Stroud, of course, had the electrifying 48-yard run. Jack Miller had 2 rushes for 23 yards, one of them an electrifying touchdown run. So I could see that. It doesn't seem like there's a big gap between the two, so certainly you can't sleep on Jack Miller if C.J. Stroud is the presumed starter. He's still going to have to earn it coming out of camp, and that's going to be, I think, a great battle. I'm going to tell you not to sleep on Kyle McCord because this guy's coming in here to start, and he's already got pressure coming from behind by some of the recruits coming in down the pipe. And so he needs to get in and get established. And so I think he's going to do that. I think he's going to come in and put on a show. And I think in some way, shape, or form, especially in the early going this season, I think we're going to see more than one quarterback this year.
I have no doubt we're going to see more than one quarterback this year. And the dynamics as to how Coach Day and the rest of the offensive coaching staff handle this is going to be something to keep an eye on. I will be immensely surprised if at the end of spring, at the conclusion of the Ohio State spring game, which is tentatively scheduled for April 17th, unless something dramatically changes. That's everything that you and I have been told and others have been told. That I highly doubt Coach Day is going to say, and it doesn't matter, any of the three names that we have talked about is the starter for the 2021 season. I think this is going to go well into fall camp. And when I mean well into fall camp, like, all right, well, that game against Minnesota is on a Thursday. This might be conjuring up memories and images of that 2015 season opener at Virginia Tech when JT Barrett and Cardale Jones were standing on the sidelines, and neither of them really knew who was going in until Coach Urban Meyer said to Cardale, "You're in," or "You're up," or whatever, how he said it. And maybe I'm being over dramatic, but I really think it behooves Ohio State to keep this competition going for the best results for the team. I think to try and keep all three players properly motivated and incentivized to compete for that job.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to get go back to normal depth charts again, but if we did, my suspicion would be that that Minnesota game, that depth chart drops, and I think it would say for quarterback C.J. Stroud or Jack Miller or Kyle McCord.
Yeah, the or position is going to be really popular. So
yeah, and these guys,
I think especially
these guys really do have to put everything they can into this battle, because when you look at what Quinn Ewers was able to do down in Texas, he's coming in next year. Somebody's got to get established, because if you don't, Quinn Ewers going to come in and maybe take that position away.
Precisely. And as I said, I think you certainly want to make it where, let's face it, it's the kind of thing, you and I have both been around Ohio State football long enough, followed Ohio State football long enough, that the last thing in the world you want is a quarterback controversy where one player has established themselves as the clear-cut starter, and for whatever reason they're not playing. I think when I think back on the quarterback battles that I've seen, I think probably one of the most dramatic examples that kind of come to mind, when it comes to the Stanley Jackson Joe Germain battle. Incidentally, that was scary to think about 25 years ago, that Mark Garcia was also in that. So there was a three-man battle right there, which quickly, as it turned into fall camp, turned to two. But as the season progressed, it started to seem, why are we not starting Joe Germain? And it just continued to kind of fester and help to divide that team. Getting to these guys, nobody has any experience. Nobody has thrown a pass in a college football game. So I think it's going to really be important for Coach Day to be as fair and transparent as possible to all involved. So that way, when whoever goes out to take that first snap, that nobody can say, all right, well, I was misled or it wasn't fair. I think, I completely agree with you about the Quinn Ewers situation, but, you have to do what's right for the team and, try to keep all three players actively involved, and hopefully the competition will bring out the best in all of them, and Ohio State will be the beneficiary of that.
Indeed. All right, let's turn our attention to the running back position, Chip. I would say this is not a given, but I would say that Master Teague will probably be your listed starter going into the season. Of course, we'll probably see some Marcus Crowley, some Steel Chambers, some Mayan Williams. Where do you see the sleeper in the group? Is it Travion Henderson, or is it somebody else that's maybe going to capture somebody's attention this year?
I don't know if he's going to qualify as a sleeper, but based on what the limited action that we saw against Clemson, I'm going to go with Mayan Williams. And I'm not, you and I have been doing this a while, so I apologize if I stole your guy. But I think you're precisely right when you say, I think Master Teague, if coming out of the spring going into the fall, it will not be surprising to me if Master Teague is the listed starter at running back. You mentioned Travion Henderson. I think Evan Pryor is also going to be turning some heads as well. But I think Mayan Williams showed enough in such limited opportunities that I think he might really get more of an opportunity to start, if not at the beginning of the season, by sometime, before the end of the 2021 season.
I agree. Don't sleep on Mayan Williams. But I'm also going to throw an additional don't sleep on Marcus Crowley either. I think he'll be fully back from the injury, and I think that he's going to have something to prove. He's got some young guys coming up to take carries away from him, so I think that'll motivate him. And I think that Marcus Crowley may be able to make a mark this season. And now we'll maybe see coming out of spring if he feels he's been passed on the depth chart, we might see that the old transfer portal get used.
The person I genuinely do feel bad for Marcus Crowley, because that injury that he sustained at the tail end of his true freshman year, I mean, I'm not sure what kind of lingering effects he may still be compensating for lack of a better word. He played probably more than he anticipated. I'm certainly more than the coaching staff anticipated against Alabama in the national championship game. So yeah, Crowley is certainly a guy that I would not overlook. I'm wondering if he's fully recovered from the injury that he sustained back in 2020.
Well, let's hope so. And again, and not to talk about every player, but Steel Chambers, if he could just get his fumbling under control and take better care of the football, I think he's another guy he's shown flashes of what he could do. He's certainly got some talent, and I think he's another one of those guys that if he doesn't break through soon, I think he might be looking for somewhere else to play football.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, because the transfer portal, Ohio State has been very fortunate so far, but again, spring football hasn't really. I mean, as we're recording this, we're almost 2 weeks out from the beginning of spring football. It's usually kind of at the end of spring football that you get an idea as to where you are on the depth chart, as to where you fit into the coaches and teams' plans for the upcoming season. So it's not surprising at the end of spring football that you hear about players deciding to transfer. So you might be right about Steel Chambers, depending on where he fits on that depth chart.
Yeah, and it would be a shame to lose someone with a name like that, because that's a world-class football name right there. Let us move outside to the wide receiver position. Of course, tons of talent returning here. Who are we not sleeping on, Chip?
Well, we already know with the return of Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. I mean, right there, there's two of your three, right?
Correct.
Now, here's the problem that I have is there's so much talent. I mean, it's you want to talk about. I mean, it's kind of Brian Hartline has certainly justified the coach's faith in him, by bringing Coach Meyer, bringing him on full time, and Coach Day keeping him on as a full time wide receivers coach. The recruiting he has done is tremendous. I don't know if you can really call this a sleeper pick, but I'm wondering what kind of a role Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to play, simply because of so much talent in that position group.
Well, I mean, he's obviously it's a great group of freshmen that came in last year. It's another, we got more coming in this year. You obviously would not expect any maybe of the top three guys to lose their starting position, but Jamison Williams easily the most likely, since you're not going to take Olave or Garrett Wilson out. I'm going to say that we do not sleep on. With all the talent coming in, I'm still going to go with Marvin Harrison Jr. because if you got a guy named Marvin Harrison on your team playing wide receiver, you should not sleep on that guy.
Certainly not. Marvin Harrison Jr. Is obviously, as you just said, a name. And without going into too much detail, I'm going to invoke the confidentiality of Buckeye Scoop insiders that were knowledgeable about the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. is turning heads based on some of the information we're getting from Nevada Buck and others in other insiders. But yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. is certainly an excellent pick for kind of a sleeper.
Yeah, because I really expect some of those second-year guys to step up, Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think we're going to see more G. Scott this year. We've already gotten some looks at Julian Fleming, so it stands to reason that he'll get more time. But, and then, of course, the very highly touted Egbuka coming in, and Emeka Egbuka, I can't say his name, out of Washington. And so there's talent everywhere, but I keep hearing everybody talking about those guys, and I don't hear people talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. as much, and I think that's probably a guy you should be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. It's ridiculous. We didn't even talk about Jaden Ballard. Just a ridiculous amount of talent at that wide receiver position, and it's tough for young guys to break through. But these guys are going to get on the field if they block, and Marvin Harrison's a little bit of a bigger guy, so I think he'll maybe be able to adjust to that and be able to do that. So that's kind of why I think he'll be on the field. So we'll see. It's possible that we have a second straight year of just all the passes go to Olave and Garrett Wilson.
Well, let's hope not, because we definitely want to keep, as you said, keep everyone happy. I'm not saying throwing the ball to wide receivers who aren't worthy of that. Like you said, I think the prime consideration is how good are you at blocking, and that's your ticket on the field. But by the same token, those wide receivers besides the aforementioned Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave need to get thrown some passes as well to keep them positively motivated, I believe.
Let's stay with the pass catchers, Chip. Jeremy Ruckert, surprise returnee, going to be back for another season, and obviously a starter. Who is your guy not to sleep on at the tight end position? Because, as you know, it's the year of the tight end.
Yeah, it's the year of the tight end. Thank you, Jeremy Ruckert, for coming back, because this position, I'm not saying that it lacks talent, but it certainly does not have a lot of experience behind Jeremy Ruckert. And for that reason alone, I think just because he probably comes up next on the depth chart, I'm going to go with Cade Stover, the converted linebacker to tight end. Cade Stover is one of those players that when he was recruited, and I freely admit I'm not much for a lot of recruiting hype and hoopla when it comes to making the decision. I think it's certainly something to be praised and certainly something to be congratulated about, but I'm not much for drawing the process out. And I don't know if you recall it, but Cade Stover, his recruiting little video was very, very nondescript. I mean, he's very proud of where he's from as well, as he should be, coming from a farming community. And so I think Cade Stover, getting back to the question, I think Cade Stover is one of these guys that is going to be itching to show what he can do. He's a football player. Maybe it didn't work out for him at linebacker, but I think at tight end, we were talking about the necessity of being a good blocker. That might be his ticket onto the field in 2021.
I think that's a good pick. I'm going to not sleep on Sam Hart. This guy's, I don't know how does the listing actually translate? I don't know. 6'5", 225. He's only a 3-star, but I think this is one of those more prototypical blocking big tight ends that you see at Ohio State from time to time, and then they go out and also catch passes. I'm thinking of, guys like, I think guys like Jake Houseman come to mind when I think of him, and Luke Farrell. So I think maybe Sam Hart is the next one of those types of guys.
From what I understand, Sam Hart has been impressive in the winter workout conditioning drills, he's one of those early enrollee freshmen. So we'll get a chance to see, or at least potentially hear, how he does once the actual practices begin later on this month.
Sam Hart, my dark horse for spring game MVP.
The 2021 Bam Childress Award.
Yeah. Year of the tight end, baby. Year of the tight end at Ohio State. Let's move inside. We talked about the offensive line a little bit in our last show 2 weeks ago. And by the way, I forgot to write up the post for that. So if you are one of those listeners who also enjoys reading the post, well, I apologize for that. Was my fault. So, but I'll try to remember to do it this week because we record on Monday night, and then generally it doesn't drop on the site. It's already in your podcast catcher if you subscribe, but it doesn't show up on the website until Wednesday, just because we've got a lot of stuff to get in over at Buckeye Scoop. So I generally write it on Tuesday evening or Wednesday morning, and I just forgot last time. So sorry about that. So what do you think? I mean, this is a position where Ohio State's got some guys returning, but also some young guys ready to step in and fill the void. Who are you not sleeping on the offensive line?
I don't know how much of a sleeper this is because he did get a chance to start, albeit late in the year, and contributed more so down the stretch. And from what we understand, is certainly a viable option at one of the interior positions. But I'm going to go with Matthew Jones simply because the presumption I had the last time we were talking about this was that Matthew Jones at guard. There's also a strong sentiment for Matthew Jones at center, which, again, I think speaks volumes about the coach's desire to get the best line, who they believe are the best linemen together, and something that was lacking last year, no fault of the coaches, no fault of the players, but just the reality of everything going on in the world, that lack of spring practice, that continuity, that chemistry that you need to develop. So I think Matthew Jones is one of these guys that don't be surprised if you see him, if not starting at one of the guard positions, starting at center.
Yeah, I really don't have anything to add. Matthew Jones is my guy there too. I don't sleep on Matthew Jones, and nobody's sleeping on Paris Johnson, and he would be the other young guy who's going to, I think, turn some heads, or the other guy who didn't start much last year, who's going to turn some heads this year. So I agree with you. Matthew Jones is the guy that I would pick on that offensive line. Why don't we flip right over onto the defensive line? I think that's everybody on the offense. Did I miss any position groups?
No, we can hit the defense real quick.
All right, let's hit the defensive line. And of course, with Tommy Togiai leaving, but Haskell Garrett staying, got some somebody's going to step in and plug in on that defensive line. Who do you think is going to flash? It doesn't even necessarily need to be a starter. It could be somebody who just plays some, in the rotation, gets some minutes on the defensive line. I will say let's do defensive line interior, and then we'll do defensive ends separately. So who are you not sleeping on the D line?
This is going to be very interesting. Haskell Garrett coming back is major, in the sense for the interior defensive line. Number of different candidates there. I'm going to go, though, with Jerron Cage on the interior defensive line, simply because I think there's going to be ample opportunities to claim that position vacated by Togiai's departure. Now, who's to say that, other defensive linemen don't step up, but I think Jerron Cage is somebody to keep an eye on.
I'm going to go with Ty Hamilton. I'm going to say Ty is going to start forging his own identity. A younger brother of Davon Hamilton. I think he's going to start forging his own identity this year. That makes sense?
Not bad. Yeah, it makes complete sense.
All right. So let's move outside to the defensive end position. And losing Jonathan Cooper. So there's going to be some new bodies there. Obviously, there's also going to be rotation more so at the defensive end positions usually than inside. Who do you got?
Well, this is a guy that I kind of look at him as a classic tweener that he could also shade in sometimes on the interior defensive line, or at least I believe his frame looks like it would be possible to do this. But I'm going to go with Tyler Friday. I think at defensive end, nothing. I mean, it was glaringly obvious last year, the departure of Chase Young, how Ohio State, they don't really have that dominant defensive end. And I'm not trying to put more pressure on Tyler Friday than there already is, but I think the opportunity is there to emerge and, if not necessarily start, be one of those contributors heavy in the rotation for Coach Larry Johnson.
So we figure Zack Harrison and Tyreek Smith are the starters out there?
Possibly. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising. I guess you could say that, there's going to be a rotation. I mean, Coach Johnson is all about the rotation. I mean, we haven't even talked about, let's be honest. I mean, Jack Sawyer is one of these guys who is an early enrolled freshman who I know that the excitement is certainly warranted, to see what Jack Sawyer can do. But yeah, I think, it's entirely possible that Tyler Friday could certainly rise up and take one of those starting positions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you brought up Sawyer. He's a freshman. I don't think anybody's sleeping on him because he's very highly recruited. But freshmen typically, I mean, unless your name is Bosa, at that position, you don't typically flash a whole lot. I was going to actually have Sawyer as my don't sleep on him guy, so he was going to be my sleeper. But I think I'm going to change that to Javante Jean-Baptiste.
Not bad. I mean, he's one of those players who, just in terms of, again, along the rotation, when he arrived at Ohio State, listening to some of the other podcasts, Javante was, to say that he was very, very slight of build would be very generous. And it's a credit to the hard work he's put in. It's a credit to Coach Mick. The steady diet of iron, I'm sure, has certainly helped. But, I mean, he's really transformed himself into a player who can certainly contribute at that defensive end position.
And still, even to this day, listed as the lightest of the defensive ends for Ohio State. But I think that he started to flash a little bit, I think, toward the middle of last year, and I think that he's just going to continue to progress. So that's why I pick him. And, of course, we obviously hope that Zack Harrison will start to really blossom. A lot of people may think that he's been disappointing so far, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, I think if you are holding him to Bosa or Chase Young standards, then I guess you could say that. But You don't really have the right to hold anyone to that standard, just the same way you don't have any right to hold anyone to the Orlando Pace standard on the offensive line. It's just not normal. So, I think we're seeing we've seen some signs from Zack Harrison, and I think he's going to get even better.
I agree. I think everyone, as we've discussed before, I think everyone has been spoiled by having the Bosas and then Chase Young, and the recruiting hype around Zack Harrison was, I guess you could say, overshadowed the fact that a lot of people were saying, he's very raw, that athletically, everyone sees the size and the speed and they think, okay, well, he's just ready to come in and wreak havoc. And as you said, he's had his moments, but he was not nearly as developed at the position like either of the Bosas or Chase Young. So I think, to kind of expect him to come in and be as dominant as those players was unrealistic. So maybe this is his year.
Yeah, let's hope so. Because now let's get to the next position, which is linebacker, which everybody's a sleeper, Chip. How do you pick a sleeper among this group? Because everybody's going to be replaced.
Not only that, I mean, just the idea of the possibility of, when it comes to the rotation in and of itself. I mean, when we talk about the traditional Mike linebacker or the Sam linebacker or the Will linebacker, the idea that players could be moved around based on, not only the opponent, but also the players themselves, their physical characteristics. I don't know how much of a sleeper this is, and I apologize again if I'm stealing your guy, but I'm going to go with Craig Young, just simply because athletically, I think he provides he came in as kind of he's one of those guys who earned his scholarship based on his performance in summer camps. Athletically, he's got tremendous speed. He kind of, I think he played wide receiver in high school and moved up into, being a linebacker. And I'm kind of anxious to see if he's going to claim one of those 3 starting spots that are available this spring.
Yeah, I mean, our good friend Gerd just wrote about the linebackers and he's got Craig Young as an or with Kayvon Pope at the Sam, with Dallas Gant at the Mike and Taraja Mitchell at the Will. I'm going to go a little bit out there and say that I don't think this player will make the starting rotation, but I think he'll get in games and make some plays, and I think that's Cody Simon. I'm gonna go with Cody Simon as my sleeper there.
I like it. I mean, Cody Simon is another one of these guys who we heard a lot about a year ago, but we haven't really had a chance to see, just as a result of everything that happened in 2020. So I'm excited to see what Cody Simon can do.
All right, Chip. Cornerback is, the secondary has been an issue. They've moved some things around, taken some things off of Kerry Combs' plate. They've elevated Matt Barnes. We've got some new things, some new systems in place in terms of how the team is going to be coached. So the corners and the safeties, who kind of bore a bit of the brunt last year for some of the defensive problems, we're going to see some changes. But Seven Banks is probably, you write him in there in indelible ink, permanent marker as a starter. We think Cam Brown will probably maybe be the other starter if he is healthy enough to be that other starter. We don't really know, and we might not know until the fall. So, who do you got? Who's your sleeper at corner?
Well, as you said, I mean, Seven Banks is pretty much the most, I guess you could say, the most logical lock at corner. We don't really know the status of Cam Brown. It's highly doubtful that we're going to hear anything more about Cam Brown, more than the fact that his rehab is progressing, hopefully. And like you said, we may not know about anything until the fall camp. So I think it's going to be essential for another corner to establish himself. I'm going to go with Ryan Watts simply because the position is there. He's played sparingly last season, but he's big, he's and lanky, and I think the opportunity to kind of stake his claim at one of those corner positions, I think Ryan Watts is a guy to keep an eye on.
Okay. I'm going to go with, just because I like the name, I'm going to go with Legend Cavazos. I think he's a guy who, he obviously came in here with a good pedigree, and I think he will, maybe start to push for some playing time. But again, Seven Banks is probably the immovable object there. If he stays healthy, he's in the lineup every week. Cam Brown, again, it depends on his health. And then after that, it's like, it's anybody's job, really. So we'll see how it goes, and it'll be one of the real areas of the team where we focus on this spring. Especially in the spring game, we're going to want to see how that secondary looks. Everybody wants to see how the quarterbacks are going to look. I want to see how the secondary is going to look.
And the thing is, like with Legend Cavazos, he came in so highly regarded, and I believe that there were some injury issues. I mean, nothing to the severity of what Cam Brown is going through. But my point being that we really don't know. I mean, it's just one of these things where that there were these defensive backs, like you said a moment ago, that we're anxious to see because we really haven't seen it. We're so used to a traditional Ohio State season where in some of the non-conference games or even some of the Big Ten opponents where Ohio State has a commanding lead and you get to see some of these second, third string guys, freshmen, redshirt freshmen, et cetera, regardless of whether we're talking offensive or defensive, get in and, okay, I can see, where they're going to fit next year. We really don't know in the secondary because not only was the secondary the major area of complaint and concern, but these guys, we haven't seen them play. So it's, I mean, I can't say anything, like Legend Cavazos, like you said, it's a great name, comes in highly touted, but it'll be interesting to see what kind of results we see during that spring game and what kind of reports we may get out of spring football.
Yeah. And this might be a year when it's been a long time since a freshman has really come in and grabbed a starting position, in the secondary, especially at corner. But I mean, there's some guys in this class that, Jordan Hancock and Ja'Kalen Johnson are a couple guys, especially I think Ja'Kalen Johnson is a guy who could potentially be in the mix. And but honestly, it's anybody's guess. And I think that's what makes this such an exciting and such a critical position to watch this spring. So, I just selfishly want Legend Cavazos to flash because I like the name. Who doesn't want somebody who's a legend to play cornerback at Ohio State?
Exactly. Somebody who's certainly not looking for confidence, that's for sure.
All right, and now we go to safety. Safety is the other part of that secondary puzzle, and we don't know, are they going to do the one high safety? Are they going to do, two deep? What are we going to see? We don't really know, but which is, it's also been a theme of the Buckeye Weekly podcast is when they talk about the safeties. We don't even really know what they're going to play this year. So, it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on the entire secondary, but you've got Marcus Hooker hasn't really taken the position yet. Josh Proctor, you would think, will get playing time. Lathan Ransom came on late in the year and will probably continue to develop. Court Williams is a guy who was injured, but the coaching staff thinks a lot of him. Where do you see the sleeper in this group? Is it Bryson Shaw? I mean,
yeah, you got it. There it is. Because let's face it. I mean, everyone that you rattled off there, there's some kind of concerns, fair or unfair. Again, we're not privy to what the coaches' meetings, what they see in practice. I'm going to go with Bryson Shaw simply because he was a guy that he came in kind of lacking a lot of the recruiting hype. But one of the things about him that I like in just his overall background is he was a standout lacrosse player, originally verbally committed to Wisconsin, flipped to Ohio State. And as you said a moment ago, we really don't know what the scheme is going to look like, if it's going to be a one high or two high. And I'm not even trying to suggest that Bryson Shaw is going to start. I just like something about the idea of a big, rangy kid playing safety that, maybe he's not necessarily going to be the most athletic or dynamic player out there, but I think that he's going to be a consistent tackler. And that's maybe I'm putting too much pressure on Bryson Shaw, but that's kind of what I'm hoping and envisioning hearing about this coming spring when you start to get reports out of spring football.
All right, well then, in that case, I will take Ronnie Hickman as my sleeper. Because why not?
I didn't mean to take your guy.
No.
I never did.
I wasn't. No, you didn't take my guy. I promise.
Okay,
and it does.
okay.
And it's perfectly okay for us to have the same opinion. It's maybe a little bit more boring for the listeners, but it's fine. That's not a problem. This isn't like our picks to click. I would say, really at safety, if anybody comes on strong, it's a sleeper situation because it was a problematic position last year. So, I think there's talent there. I think there was some problems with the scheme, maybe some problems with some guys not quite being ready. And, I think it just kind of all snowballed, especially when you consider the fact that last year wasn't normal. You didn't have the spring to put in Kerry Combs, for Kerry Combs to get settled in. So, there's a lot of things last year that were out of the ordinary. So I think if anybody really comes on and has a great year, even Josh Proctor, I think any of the safeties would be a sleeper to have a great year. So we'll see how it goes. And we'll, again, the entire secondary is going to have my full attention this spring.
I think the entire secondary is going to have every Ohio State fan's attention this spring, because it's one of these things where it was just kind of, I think a combination of the lack of spring practice last year when you had, you already had personnel losses. And granted, I think, there's no team in college football that doesn't have personnel losses. But I think the fact that you lost 3 starters plus your defensive coordinator who implemented the scheme, brought in a well-respected former Ohio State assistant back into the program, asking him to coach a scheme that may not necessarily have a tremendous amount of knowledge or comfort level in. Mm-hmm. We don't know if, and this is not meant to disparage any of these young men, if the scheme really fits their skill or talent level. I mean, there's just so many variables that kind of, I think, contributed to that perfect storm of, what was going on. So that's why when we started talking about it in this segment, are they going to play 1 high or 2 high safeties? We really don't know. I think if they play 2 high, it's more of, I think it's more along the lines of, all right, this is kind of best suited for their skill level, but I don't, we really don't know until we start getting those reports.
Exactly. All right, Chip, we've gone through the offense and the defense, and what I need to know from you now, Chip, is the sleeper Jake Seibert or Dominic DiMaggio at kicker?
I don't know if it's so much of a sleeper. I'm going to go with Jake, simply because he was recruited to the position. I think this is his job to lose, put it that way.
All right, and Jesse Mirko is probably going to punt this year.
Yeah, I would certainly hope so. He's come a long way to not be called upon. And I think, from what I understand, I think he's 23. So, he's kind of like the elder statesman of the entire team.
Yeah. And, you got it. Obviously Drew Chrisman moved on. I haven't seen anything official on Zack Hoover declaring for the draft. So I couldn't tell you if he's going to take his COVID year.
Like you said last episode when we were talking about certain players who are walk-ons who entered the transfer portal, that was kind of news to us that was even a thing to do. So, I haven't seen anything either about Zack Hoover.
And then Michael O'Shaughnessy, let's not sleep on him, from New Albany.
No, certainly possible. I think special teams is an overlooked, underappreciated area. It's one of these things where until it costs you in a game, people kind of casually overlook it. But I think there are certainly a number of individuals who it's going to be interesting to see and read about players emerging at those critical positions.
Yeah, I think basically, though, if you're a punter, just tell everyone you're from Australia, even if you're not. It's probably just better for your career.
Okay, well, I guess, career embellishment. I guess it can't really fault you.
I'm from New Albany, Australia. Yeah. I'm from Mentor, Australia.
There you go.
Yeah, it works. Pickerington, Australia. That's where I'm from. It works. So there you have it. There's your offensive and defensive guys not to sleep on. And of course, we make no guarantees that anybody that we mentioned tonight during this show will do anything this year.
Just like our Big Ten predictions, like we'll have to wear those predictions of shame, well until next season.
Until our next predictions of shame.
Yeah, and hopefully they won't be as abysmal.
We will wear them around our neck like the albatross in the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner.
There you go.
All right, Chip. Anything else from the Ohio State football team that you would like to discuss before we get on out of here this week?
No, I mean, it's like you said, we're kind of, anxious to start getting information just like everyone else. The spring practice officially starts in some way, shape, or form on March 19th. And we still don't know what days between now and April 17th, or I should say March 19th through April 17th, what days practice are actually going to be held on, but anxious to start hearing about who's starting to emerge.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see, if we can get, if we get our guys some time at practice, even if it's just a little bit, get some of those practice reports rolling out and get some, some kind of update on how folks are doing, who's running with the ones, and who's looking good. Of course, if you're at BuckeyesScoop.com and you're a subscriber, you're already getting a lot of that information now, and that's one of the big values of it is that you don't have to wait too long. You're getting behind the scenes stuff every week on who's flashing, who's impressing the coaches, who's tearing it up in the weight room, that kind of thing. So, if you have not yet done that, subscribe.
Certainly worth the investment, that's for sure.
All right, Chip, let us call it a pod, and you can start by telling folks where they can find you on the internet.
I can be found on Twitter. My name, Chip Minnich, at Chip Minnich. Last name is spelled Minnich. And besides podcasting for Buckeye Scoop, I'm also a contributor at Athlon Sports. You may find an article from about a week ago about 5 newcomers for Ohio State football, some of whom we talked about in this podcast tonight.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff. I am also someone you can follow on Twitter if you so choose. And that Twitter handle is at Mike36Fan. I am the grumpy old Buckeye at the Buckeye Scoop at buckeyescoop.com. And, of course, that's in season. I will gripe about all the things that I have found to gripe about in any given game. Make sure you're reading the site. Make sure you are listening to the other podcasts, Buckeye Weekly, Morning Scoop, Scoop World Order, the Sloopcast, all of those fine programs. Tom Orr's doing wonderful things every day with the Morning Scoop, having tons and tons of experts on from all different sports and all walks of life. And Chip, how many times have you been on the Morning Scoop?
That would be negative, Ghost Rider. I haven't been on once, so I don't know. If Tom's still holding a vendetta against me, but I'm certainly. I would love to be on the Morning Scoop.
I too have a goose egg in the column of having been on the Morning Scoop. So we said that Tom has experts on, and we have combined not been on at all. So what does that say about us?
Obviously, somehow, he doesn't have our number. I think that's what it says to me.
All right, Tom, you can of course also use those same Twitter handles to slide up on our DMs and invite us on the Morning Scoop if you want. At Chip Minnich, Minnich, at Mike36fan. Let's hear from you.
You got it.
All right.
You got it.
Okay, Chip. Well, you and I will reconvene in 2 weeks. We're doing a bi-weekly show here in the off season. This is new territory for us. We are, of course, usually mostly just we kick up right about a couple weeks before the season starts, and we go till just after the season ends usually. But we're diving in. We're trying to do this whole thing year round, and so this is our maiden voyage in the off season.
Yeah, and the nice thing is, though, in a couple weeks we'll actually have, if not a ton of news, we might have some news, as Ohio State will have begun spring practice the next time we reconvene.
Indeed, and of course, recruiting never sleeps. You got guys that have pushed back their commitments, and other guys who still haven't made decisions. So you never know. You never know. There could be some exciting recruiting news coming up by the time we do our next show, and we will be here to talk about it. So I guess with that, we will call it a podcast, and we will be back in a couple of weeks. So the only thing left to do is what we always do at the end, and that is to say, go Bucks.
Go Bucks.